Hey Vox, coming to you from the Vox Cafe, and it's good to be with you even in this way. Today we have some great content for you. We're in a series at Vox called 7 Words, exploring the 7 words of Jesus from the cross. And today I've got some guests. One you will recognize, my good friend John Bowles, the pastor of Beggars Table Church and Gallery, and a member of his congregation, Josh Payne, who by trade is a farmer, former English teacher, and I like to think of him as kind of a young Wendell Berry. So today we set up in the Vox Cafe and we're having a conversation about the next word of Jesus from the cross. So enjoy the conversation.
Well, welcome everyone. We're glad that you could join us, and we are definitely excited to be here. We are real fans of this format for sure. You will notice that we are arranged so that the best looking one is in the middle. I jest, but we were just discussing how this is such a kind of an awkward setup for us, or not, or something that we all have to kind of get used to.
I know, for one, when I dreamed of becoming a pastor, I could not wait to get on television. Isn't that why we all do this?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I know for you, I don't know about you, at Vox, I've been the one who's been completely resistant to any kind of video. I just feel like there's something about church that's necessary to be present to one another physically, and so we've really resisted the idea of live streams and that sort of thing. But in this moment that we're in, this is maybe the most human move we can make, is to provide faces to people so we can still see that we are good and happy and content. Even in the midst of this moment of anxiety. So
yeah, I love the fact that here we are in social distancing where everybody feels really isolated, but we're doing what we can to be together.
Wait, shouldn't we be at least 6 feet apart?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, we're
Maybe
a little
bit
close
more.
right now.
We've consciously tried to sit somewhat apart so that we can model some social distancing even while we're together.
We have washed our hands and we refrained from shaking hands, which was very awkward.
Yeah, I will say.
Josh, I haven't seen you for, how long has it been?
Oh, probably 2 years. And I
2
walked
years.
up to the front door and wanted to shake your hand, and
Right.
wait a second. So
Hopefully next time.
Well,
Yeah,
one of the great benefits of the way that we do sermons is that it lends itself to this kind of thing, because I tell my people quite often that my sermons on Sunday come from a dialogue that you and I are having.
That's right.
And I love the fact that we're often doing the same sermon series at our churches, which sometimes makes it easy to speak at your church because I've already prepared that sermon. But in this case, we're doing the same thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool opportunity to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit and invite people in our congregations into the community that we have cultivated over this last decade or more.
Yeah.
Because normally every Wednesday afternoon we're having this kind of conversation, pushing on different ideas, reading scripture together, talking about books and movies, and so hopefully this conversation will be a little bit of a window into that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know even though we're doing the same content, we call it something different. A lot of the times. So we've been calling these last 7 words of Jesus, this whole Sunday conversation, this whole teaching series, squeezed. And the reason we call it squeezed is the idea that death squeezes us. And, you know, when I say death, I mean all of the things that are associated with death, like fear, uncertainty, anxiety, and a lot of the things that we're experiencing right now in this whole season.
Yes.
And so the idea is that when we look at the cross, we see Jesus being squeezed by death. And I really think that when we're squeezed like a lemon, what's most true about us is what comes out. So that we can look at the last 7 words of Jesus and we see, in my opinion, we kind of see the essence of Jesus. We see what's most true about him. And his last 7 words are, of course, really famous. Both of our churches have already covered the first 2 words, which is, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And truly, I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise. But today, we're going to take some time to look at the 3rd word. But it is just interesting to relate all of this to the situation that we're in right now, and just kind of reflect on the ways and the different ways that we're being squeezed, the way that we see people being squeezed around us, and what tends to come out. And you were sharing, Josh, a really fun story, or interesting, insightful story about your grandpa before we got started here. I thought maybe you could share that for us.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times I see the world through the lens of the relationship between my grandpa and myself. It's this little microcosm of society in some ways, and so a lot of times I'll go in and talk to my grandpa first thing in the morning. I'll work a couple hours, and then like 8:30 or 9, I'll go in and talk to him. And what I've noticed is in the past couple weeks, like as he's been squeezed by the coronavirus, as things have happened, he like a big, both the good and the bads come out of that. So I'll walk in and I'll see him watching Fox Business, and then I'll see him switch to CNN Money and these other things. And so he is definitely a head type when it comes to like an Enneagram. I'm not sure where your guys, I know where Beggars is. I'm not exactly sure where Vox is on Enneagram stuff, but I assume we've talked about it.
Yeah, we have.
But so he's a head type, and so he's all about security. And for him, he grew up in the Great Depression. He was born in 1928. And so he's worried about the coronavirus, like causing this worldwide recession. And so he's watching these monetary things and being like, it's down 1%, it's down 3%, it's down 2,000. And
there's been nothing good to see the last few days.
Oh no! But then what'll happen? You wait till the next day. It'll come back a little bit, and his mood is he's excited. Oh, it's coming back, and then it'll go way back down. And so then you see both his like all this hard-earned security that he has, and he's still totally safe, and he's still totally fine. And so like, and that concern, like the good, healthy concern that he has for me and my family, for his future, as he continues to live on. He's 91, so he's got to be thinking about some of this end of life stuff too. So like that good concern is coming out, but at the same time, it's controlled predominantly by the stories that he's being told on TV, because that's his source of interaction. And so he's watching that, and that's driving like major decision. Like we're getting ready to go into sheep, right? And that's probably a different story, but we're getting ready to go into sheep, and stock markets are down 2,000. He's like, well, we just can't do this. We just cannot we can't do this in this time of uncertainty. Whereas me, on the other hand, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, and so I've got these big goals and these big visions and things that I'm always working for, and I'm like utterly just flippant about this whole coronavirus thing, probably to an extreme. Probably to the point where I'm like, I can just go and build my fence, and I can get my sheep, and I can just take care of my stuff on my farm, and then like to the detriment of me forgetting that there's a whole other part of the world there that I'm like, there's my neighbors that I have to worry about, my grandfather, and these other people that just don't fit neatly into my goal. And I think you see those two extremes played out, and you see my grandpa's driven by fear, and you see me, the overly flippant, and like both extremes of society playing out in that one dining room table every single morning.
It's good.
Sounds like the church. And it sounds like our staff. We've got a small staff here at Vox, but very different people, different gifts, different temperaments, and it's kind of been encouraging to watch as we've picked one another up a little bit with our enthusiasm and excitement, and being able to even voice and share our anxiety and to reassure one another when needed. I just find it myself, I don't know about you, John, but when all this is kind of beginning to crest as a wave that's kind of come over the culture, I find in myself, as I'm being squeezed and pressed, there are a lot of different kinds of things in me. There's some moments of worry. I've got a great imagination, which is not necessarily a benefit in times like this, when I can imagine some very morbid things, but I also have a streak of energy and contentment, and I'm not a real risk-averse person, a security-oriented person, so I've got a lot of creativity and a lot of hopes, and I'm looking for opportunities. But I find a mix even within myself of things that are, I'm like, good, I hope I'm not modeling bad things to people around me. I have my moments, right?
Well, see, and what I was wondering is, so like I'm in an industry, I'm worried about global food supplies and stuff like that, which directly affects markets, but I'm in an industry that I can do on my own. Like my
Yes.
day-to-day life isn't really affected by quarantines. Like my whole life is a quarantine, right? But
That's right.
like you guys, like your individual personal lives revolve around highly communal,
Yeah.
like high
Yeah.
social
Yeah, it's high
gatherings.
touch.
So,
It's face to face, and yeah. So it's a little
Yeah.
weird thinking about what it's going to take to move through this. And well, I think we both feel like all will be well, and we'll figure this out. And uncertainty will give way to good practices, and we'll find ways to do this. It's incredibly disruptive to the center of our community, which is gathered worship.
Right, very disruptive. I'll tell you what I find in myself, though. I don't know about you guys, but I'm more of an introvert than I am an extrovert, and I have a pretty rich interior life. I like to read. I like to watch movies. I like to. Sometimes I have great dialogues with myself. You know? So the whole idea of being quarantined and or isolated does not threaten me. At least initially, it doesn't. I'm like, this is right in my
it
wheelhouse.
excites you, right?
But please don't put me in the briar patch.
Yeah, right. But
Don't
as
make me stay home alone.
but as a pastor, we're what you just said. We're our vocation is very high touch, and I realize there's an anxiety that people are feeling out there, and I need to address that and figure out how we can be present to one another when I have this natural inclination to just be fine on my own. So it's a challenge that way.
Yeah, I tend to be a little more introverted too, but I'm also, I love people, and I felt even this first Sunday of being apart, a real emptiness of like, man, I really miss people, and I love our congregation. And
Right now my church is going great. Our pastor doesn't love us.
Well,
I know, that's not what I mean.
I know you feel the same because you shared that with me.
Yeah,
There is a sense of like being introverts, it's almost in a way we might rely even more on the interaction that we get when we're with people.
Right.
We cherish that time.
We really do.
Yeah, well, and so for me, I'm just the opposite. And so, like our family, a big part of our individual family ministry, if you want to call it that way, that sounds so churchy, sorry, but is to have people over for dinner. And all of a sudden in this time, we're finding ourselves not having people over for dinner. Like, what are we going to do? Have virtual dinners?
Right.
Like, that's interesting. And like sometimes they may prefer that to the food that we cook for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like it's even like it's dramatically affecting the people that we have in our house, and so we're having a hard time finding the places for the things that we like to do, for the ways that we like to reach out, and just like to build community around our home.
Yeah. Which is honestly a great segue into the word this week.
I was going to read that if I could. This is our word for this week. The third word of Jesus on the cross is from John 19. And I'll start in verse 25. We read, "Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, 'Woman, here is your son.' And to the disciple, he said, 'Here is your mother.' And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home." And I'll read that last line again. I really like that. From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. Basically what we're going to do is have some reflection on this word, this word that's being squeezed out of Jesus at this moment. But I will just go ahead and say that I find it fascinating, and always have found it fascinating, that this is the first act. And you pointed this out too, Josh, earlier when we were talking. This is the first act of Jesus' movement. And I think that's another way of saying that this is the very beginning of the church, which really is what Jesus' movement led to, was the church. And I just find it really interesting when we stop and think or consider what all of the other things are that Jesus' first act could have been. I mean, here he has a concern. What's being squeezed out of him is a concern for his followers and what his followers will do when he's gone. And think of all the things that he could have said. He could have said, Mother, John, I command you to worship me diligently, gather together with great gusto. As you said, get a great praise band,
Send your tithes and offerings online, please.
Send your tithes and offerings online, please. He doesn't say anything. I think it's interesting that what he says in regard to his family is take care of each other. Just look out for one another and invite this person into your home. Yeah. Take the needy, because Mary was in a position where she was going to be needy here, probably already was, but take this needy person into your home. So I just think it's a really thought-provoking word.
Well, and like to add on to that, I think it's important to note that the first act of the Christian church wasn't done by Jesus. Like it was done by John, or sorry, not John, the beloved disciple. You can't necessarily coordinate those two. It's just it's the default from my childhood. I'm sorry, but yeah. So like the beloved disciple makes the first act, and it's him taking the mother of Jesus into his home.
Yeah.
And so it's not Jesus in like doing this. It's his followers, and it's the people who are starting this church, and they're the ones who are acting, and like they're the ones who are imaging God and bringing in this movement, like bringing it like to life.
Yeah, I like that. Like you have to act. I'm commending you to do something, and this is what I want you to do. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah,
that's great. And it seems like this is one of our past conversations. We talked about Jesus in the whole narrative through the Gospels is slowly challenging and redefining what family is going to look like going forward, right? And it's at this kind of pivotal point that he is finally answering questions that he's been posing throughout the narrative.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because throughout the Gospels, throughout the story, not necessarily John, but throughout all, when you look at all the Gospels, he's continually being asked questions about who is your family? Like, why are you with these people? Why aren't you with your family? And there just seems to be this question. You can read a tension into his situation with his family, and then it's like you've got this question of who is Jesus' family? What's he doing with his biological family? Yeah. Which, by the way, if you don't mind, a little tangent here, which, by the way, is I think that sometimes we forget how important that was in his culture. Like your family and the honor that you bring to your family was everything. Right. And so, of course, he had extreme tension with that. His family, it's worth noting, his family was not happy with him most of the time, where there was great question.
I noted a few of those instances. It's probably worth just mentioning them briefly, although there's a lot to say about each one of them. The first being the first question Jesus asks in his ministry of questions is when he gets left behind at the temple at 12 years old for 3 days, which is, parental nightmare, but that's a different sermon.
Home Alone.
Home Alone in the temple. And when confronted by his parents, who take it deeply personally, why have you done this to us? Jesus is asking the question already. Don't you know whose family I belong to? Didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house? Then you fast forward to the wedding at Cana, where he has a confrontation with Mary, which is another honor-shame moment, right? And Jesus is addressing her as woman. Why are you coming at me like this? There's the instance where his biological family, shows up at the house where Jesus is teaching, and people are trying to get his attention, and Jesus is questioning, who is my family?
Yeah. His family actually came to get him.
That's right. Yeah. So all that is in play here in the narrative by the time you get to this point, and Jesus is now addressing mother, son.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the fact that in that society, there would have been a set line of people who should have taken her into his home, right? Okay. Whether that's, you have Joseph, who, we don't know if we assume he's not in the picture, right? Well, then Joseph's brother would have been supposed to take Mary, as his wife, right? Well, and then from there on, there's this, a set line. And it's like Jesus is stepping away from that. He's saying, no, it's not this cultural line of heredity of people that should take care of like the poor and the oppressed here. Instead, it's this person based upon this experience of me as Messiah, of me on the cross.
Yeah.
So it's like your family is now identified around my action right here on the cross, which is like him just completely stepping out of societal norms.
Yeah. I mean, we often don't think of church that way, as a new family, a family that's formed around the cross, and that's a powerful thing. We really take that into consideration, isn't it?
Well, see, now I'd be so in my context, in a more of a rural, small town area. You know, my family is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wonder sometimes if that's a different notion between rural and urban. Like, you know, y'all live in Kansas City, and you live in Belton.
The metropolis of Belton, Missouri.
Hey, now we have like 2,000 people in ours. You have like 21 as I drove into town today.
I grew up in a town of 1,000, so
yeah,
I'm with you there.
So,
but
it's like in our town, like church is a family, but not so much as family is. But when we've lived in Kansas City, it seems like church and small groups and these things actually become people's family because families aren't there.
That's right.
And so like it truly provides this context that like the body of Christ can be a family.
Yeah. It's a great concept. It's a great truth that I find myself wrestling with all the time. But yeah, you know, even that idea of what does family around the cross mean? You know, what does that imply for us? I expect you guys to have the answers
on this podcast. We'll solve everything in this podcast, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, well, the cross, I mean, it is interesting that Jesus waits to this pivotal moment in the presence of the cross, answering these questions, as you guys have said. It's who is my family? It's these people gathered in my presence at this moment who've not run away, who've remained faithful. Holding up Mary as one who's been receptive to God from the very beginning of the narrative, right? Let it be unto me according to your word. He's holding her up. He's holding up John or whoever this is, the beloved disciple,
yes.
as another example of faithfulness, of presence. And so here's your family. Who's my family? It's the ones gathered here. Where is my family going to be formed? At the cross. So immediately we have this sense of this is a kind of family that is going to be built in self-sacrificial love for the other.
You know, I just read from Richard Rohr this morning that the meaning of suffering is to feel another's pain. Isn't that something when you think about family? Because that's really what we do in family is we feel one another's pain so much. Carrie and I suffer because our son is on the Arizona Trail right now in the middle of the coronavirus, and he's having the time of his life, but Carrie and I feel pain. Just the normal anxiety of a parent, but that's suffering. You know, we suffer. Right. We feel each other's pain. Yeah.
Well, there's something about children especially that are just pieces of us outside our body, outside our control, therefore. You know, part of you is with Palmer out on the trail. Yeah. And it's not fair because he's having fun and you're hurting. My mom warned me it would be like this, right? When I was being crazy in my 20s and traveling all over the place. Yeah. And now that I have children who are teenagers, she's like, I told you it would be like this.
Yeah, I'll never forget when Ellie was born. You know, we were elated, and I remember Carrie held Ellie, and one of the first things she said, I always stuck with me, is that she said, I don't want anything bad to happen to her. You know, so your first inclination as a mom is nothing bad happened to you. And I feel like that's somewhat of what the family around the cross is that we feel each other's pain so intensely. We want to help each other and protect each other and sacrifice in the way a parent sacrifices for their kids, sacrifice for one another.
Which it's another redirect that's happening there, though, because you can imagine Mary. Yeah, I assume she has all the motherly instincts to Jesus that any mother or father would have toward a child. So she's got this happening, her son being crucified in front of her on that level, on the biological attachment level, familial attachment level. And here's Jesus redirecting and saying, have this same relationship here with the beloved disciple.
Yeah, exactly.
With the church. to one to another. You guys are to have this same attachment of you, my brothers, outside myself. When you suffer, I suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, see, and as I was preparing and reading this, like that was one of the thoughts that I had. It's like why did Mary feel like she had to go along with this? I mean, she probably would have had other people, right? And like how is she feeling? Jesus looks down at her in this moment. She's watching her son, who she birthed, who she carried in her womb. She birthed, and she grew up, and she probably spanked. And
surely not.
No, yeah. Jesus,
I have never had that thought before, right?
And Jesus didn't cry in the lay in the manger thing, yeah, right, all that stuff. But in reality, that stuff happened. But it's like, so she's looking at this, her little boy, and like he says, hey woman, like look at your son, and like what is she thinking about? What is she processing as her son's dying, and now he's like giving her away to somebody else, and somebody that she probably knows, but also somebody that she might have resented. Yeah. Like he was with her son for the past 3 years during his ministry, and at least in the book of John, she's largely absent. She's absent from the story from the time of the wedding, where Jesus turns water into wine.
The very book we get this word from.
Yes, right.
The book that has this passage, Mary's curiously absent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so, is she feeling resentment? It's like, I wonder if I was Mary, I would have been like, I'm not going to go with that guy.
Wow.
But somehow, like she, for some reason, in this story, like she acquiesces, and she goes and she allows herself to be redefined, her family to be redefined by the man on the cross, who's kind of no longer her son, but just the man on the cross.
Wow. I've read one theologian who described this moment as Mary making the transition from being mother of God to follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty good.
Yeah. A moment of surrender, and I think that sort of thing, that sort of insight calls upon each of us to bring it back around to a moment of coronavirus, a moment of surrender to who is our family, what's our responsibility to neighbor, what's our attachment.
And even in Mary's situation, like how do we allow ourselves to be cared for by other people? Like for me, that's really like there's this old hymn that just always plays in my head, like whenever I'm in tough situations. It's called the Servant Song. It's we are travelers on a journey, we are pilgrims on a road, we are here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. And the second verse is,
you sing it?
Rustin can.
We do sing that song.
Oh, you guys do it
at Vox.
Oh man,
we have for years, and it's beloved.
So you guys know, but it's like, brother, let me be your servant. Let me be as Christ to you. And then the hard part for me is pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too. Right. And I think in Mary here we see that. We're in this time of coronavirus. There's a chance I'm going to get sick. Like there's a chance that people are going to have to take care of me instead of what I hope is I don't help other people to get sick. Yeah. But it's like
we do imagine ourselves as the heroes who are going to
right.
That's why we're all in the business, right? But certainly, we don't know what's ahead.
Yeah, like, and so that's something that phrase, pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too. Pray that I might have the grace to be like Mary, and to allow myself to be taken into the home possibly of a stranger. Somebody who in the book of John doesn't even name, just the beloved disciple. So,
that's really good.
So, how do you land a plane in a format like this? We were joking that a lot of times learning how to preach is learning how to end a sermon. Yeah. Right. Everybody knows how to start talking. Nobody knows how to end something. So.
Yeah, Indians have never been my thing. Me and Stephen King.
Yeah. Well, I think one appropriate thing that we do each week at Vox is we say we want our gathering time to be a time of blessing. Yes. Our world is so full of curses. Certainly people might be feeling cursed right now by anxiety, fear for imagining dark things. But in the church, we're full of hope. We know that things are going to get better. Things will no doubtedly always be different after this, but we will resume things that are more familiar and comfortable in the weeks ahead. So we want to,
Well, think of how that applies to like the scene that we're looking at on the cross, right? Yeah. Jesus is there on the cross, and the church is in the position to be like to be blessing the world,
that's
like
right.
through like in persona
Yeah.
Christi, if you want to go all Catholic and everything. But then it's like looking out to these two people with very different fears.
Yeah.
Mary has lost a son.
Yeah.
John has lost a leader.
Mm.
And so to these people who have lost everything in their lives,
Yeah.
Jesus says, no, like be blessed, but not just be blessed,
Yeah.
go and bless each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there it is.
And that's the beginning of the church. That's the beginning of like a movement. The first.
Amen.
Amen to that.
That's good. Elbow.
Oh, sorry. I'm not. I should have did that. That'd have been
Yeah,
bad.
I know.
You could. I could have caught the coronavirus from you.
You probably would
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Well, peace of Christ to you guys, Josh, and your work on the farm and in your community and family, and John and with Beggars Table that we love here at Vox. And my computer's still dinging.
Yeah.
So we're not real professional. Well, let me leave us with this blessing that we use here at Vox most weeks, and it's from Numbers, and it goes like this. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you his peace now and forever. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.